Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee and this week I want to talk about how do you paint something so small. So this week's topic is sort of an extension of last week's or the last few Sunday talking points and the conversations we've had about the cost of wargaming and the affordability of our hobby. Now my view is that wargaming isn't as expensive as many hobbies and is as rewarding and as immersive as any of the typical alternatives. Now of course you can make your own terrain, use plastic ranges over metal, or even 3D print your own miniatures to keep the costs down. But what if I said that you could wargame big battles at a fraction of the cost of traditional alternatives? So I'm being a bit cheeky here really, because today I want to return to a subject that I've discussed several years ago to make an earnest request of my fellow wargamers. Don't discount 6mm before you've even given it a fair try. Now, we've all heard the common refrains, how do you paint something so small? My eyes can't cope with 6mm. But let's be honest, anyone who doesn't paint miniatures could probably say the same thing about 28mm scale figures. Now I'd like to respectfully suggest that there are, these are misconceptions, if you like, born sometimes of misunderstanding, sometimes of ignorance, and often a little bit of scale prejudice in a market that's dominated by 28mm ranges. But what if I told you that 6mm could revolutionise your gaming experience? So let's explore the benefits of wargaming with 6mm miniatures and why I think you should give this scale a try. Now I'm not oblivious to the fact that I'm going to make an earnest pitch for 6mm and I've got 28mm figures on my table. I'm not for a minute suggesting that other scales are not suitable or some are inferior. I like to paint all different scales, but I do have a very large 6mm collection and I do think it solves a lot of problems that people often have, and actually it's not as difficult to paint as you think, but we'll come back to that in a moment. So the first big benefit for me, I think, is that bigger battles are finally possible. One of the most compelling advantages of 6mm miniatures is the ability to recreate truly massive battles on the games table. In this scale, units look like units, and with a lower figure to man ratio that allows plenty of players to command entire brigades and divisions with relative ease. And of course in larger scales, recreating historical battles often means scaling down engagements to make them playable on a tabletop. With 6mm however, you can fight out battles on a much closer historical scale. Armies of real flanks, allowing for tactical manoeuvres that simply aren't possible with larger scales where space constraints force unrealistic deployments. And this adds a whole new dimension to playing periods or battles you may have thought that you already knew fairly well. So linked to that we have benefit number 2, smaller tables or even bigger battles. So not everyone has space for a traditional 6x4 wargaming table. My own table here in front of me now is just 5 foot by 3 foot and I couldn't fit much bigger in my room, and many players have even less room. So instead of being restricted to 28mm skirmish games, why not go smaller in scale and bigger in scope? With 6mm, large battles can play out on much smaller tables. So for example, there was a game by Per Broden, he did Lund as a game at Joy of Six a few years ago, and it was designed to fit on a typical dining room table. Now many rule sets such as DBA are designed for 4x4 boards, making them perfect for smaller gaming spaces. If you do not have the luxury of a larger table, you can go even bigger and play battles of grand tactical scales that would be impossible with 28mm or even 15mm figures. Now the third benefit is the one that links back to previous videos. The cost is a more affordable option. One of the most appealing aspects of 6mm is simply that it's so much cheaper. Simply put, it's one of the most budget friendly ways to build a wargaming army. For the price of a single large 28mm regiment, you can field an entire 6mm army. A force of hundreds of figures and dozens of units might set you back just 30 to 50 quid, whereas the same army in 28mm could easily add another 0 to that number. And if you want to get into historical or sci-fi mass battles without breaking the bank, 6mm is an excellent choice. Now benefit number 4, space. It's easier to store, transport a 6mm army. Storage is, it's a universal issue among wargamers. If you've ever struggled to find room for your growing collection, 6mm is a fantastic solution. A full 6mm army can usually fit neatly into a single A4 sized rub box. Even a large collection spanning multiple periods and fractions can be stored in just a couple of those boxes. And it also makes transportation a breeze. Anyone who's run a demo game understands the logistics, the nightmare of moving large armies to an event. 6mm makes the problem far more manageable and a lot better for your back. Benefit number 5, they are easier to paint. Now this may sound counterintuitive, but 6mm is actually one of the easiest scales to paint. And as I say, I paint all different scales, so I know I have a little bit of an understanding of what I'm talking about here. At first glance, painting such tiny figures might seem daunting, but the trick is in the approach. You don't need to paint intricate details like buttons or facial expressions. Broad strokes and block colours are enough to achieve fantastic results. And I strongly recommend checking out the Bacchus painting guides, and I'll put a link in the comments in the description below. And if you've ever painted buttons on a 28mm figure, you already have the accuracy and patience needed for 6mm, I promise you. The difference is that in this scale you don't need to worry about tiny details. Instead, a good wash, some dry brushing and basing will make an entire unit look impressive in no time. Personally, I've completed whole armies in a couple of months, and I'm relatively slow compared to some 6mm painters. Now, benefit number 6, range of periods. Fantasy, sci-fi, historical. Another misconception is that 6mm has limited options. This couldn't be further from the truth. After years of building up this scale with multiple manufacturers, there's a lot of choice out there, and the range of periods and settings available for 6mm is growing all the time. From ancient battles to Napoleonic Wars, World War II, even modern conflicts, there's no shortage of options. Fantasy and sci-fi ranges are also expanding, with several manufacturers producing excellent models. On top of that, 3D printing is making custom 6mm miniatures more accessible than ever. If there's a niche unit out there that you can't find, chances are someone has a 3D file somewhere that you can use, or you can customize one that already exists at a fraction of the cost of traditional sculpting. So, more 6mm propaganda. Still not convinced by my argument? Well, I encourage you to check out the Bacchus website and read an excellent essay by Peter Berry on the history and the benefits of 6mm. He explains the appeal of this scale far better than I ever could, and his insights are well worth a read. I'll put a link in the description box below. So in conclusion, 6mm Wargaming offers an incredible combination of affordability, playability and accessibility. If you love the idea of commanding massive battles, fielding huge armies and making the most of limited space, then 6mm is well worth your consideration. Don't let scale prejudice or misconceptions hold you back. Give 6mm a try and you might just discover your new favourite way to wargame. So, time for a hobby update. Last week's video went absolutely nuts. I had over 12,000 views and a ton of interactions in the comments, and I wish I could pull that off every week, but I'm very grateful to everyone who watched and shared the video, and especially to the 150 people who decided to subscribe to the channel off the back of that single video alone. So I'll try not to let you down, but as always I'd ask all subscribers, old and new, if you have any questions or ideas for a topic you'd like me to discuss in a future video, put them in the comments as a question and I'll do my best to work it into the schedule. So now it's time for a Workbench update. It's been another really busy week painting for the Analog Hobbies Painting Challenge, and Friday I completed 2 more units for the Retreat from Moscow collaboration project that Ray and I are working on. Now these units are, once again, ones that were not on my original shopping list for this project. What can I say? I have got more than a little carried away with this small project, and by the end I'll have around 20-25 units for a game that usually only requires 5, 6, 7 to play. Now I messaged Ray the other day and I said I had bought the last models for my army, and he immediately replied, "You always need more." Like some mischievous imp sitting on my shoulder saying, "Go on, buy them, you know you want to." And the sad thing is, it's probably right. So this week I have 2 units of line Jaegers and an officer. The models are from Front Rank and sold by Gripping Beast here in the UK. And as with other Front Rank figures I've bought, they need very little cleaning up. Aside from a little bit of filing of the bases and a couple of small mould lines, they were very quick and easy to clean up, ready for painting. Now these Jaegers carry the standard 1808 pattern musket and socket bayonet. They wear the new 1812 Shako, and even on campaign many of these troops retained the white Shako cords on their headgear. All the leatherwork and straps are black for Jaegers over the standard grey greatcoat. And as with other infantry, they wear black boots but with knee-high black gaiters with brass buttons. Now, I opted for yellow shoulder straps, which would normally have the division number in red on them, but my ends are not nearly steady enough for that level of detail, so I left that bit off. Equally, the brass regimental numbers on the back black cartridge box has been left off. So I always think if you can't do those sort of details perfectly, then you're better off not adding them at all. Next up on my workbench, as you can see, some more opportunity, including a rather nice gun and limber set from Perry Miniatures. Keep an eye out for that next week. So that's it for this week. As always, please join the conversation in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share. It really does help grow the channel. And if you want to keep up to date with weekly content, please tap the bell notification icon. So until next week, stay safe, keep gaming, and of course, keep rolling on.